Jim LaPierre. This is Sober Now, and today's topic is how to have a healthy relationship. Partnership, common mistakes that people make. So, as always, welcome your questions and comments. Please just write in on any of the streams that we have going today. And if you haven't already been over to Sober Now's Facebook page, please head over there, give it a quick like. You'll get notified about future live streams and other content that we create. So let's just get into it. It's interesting to me that when we talk about relationships and recovery, we're only referring to romantic relationships. Before we go looking for the perfect love, we do well to consider every other type of relationship in our life, because pursuing a partner without having a really great foundation in recovery, and specifically an active and effective support system, not just people that are there if you need them, but people that are actually there for you, that you're actually soliciting and giving support to. Having that in place is vital, and not having that in place before you seek a partnership is really just a setup for failure. It's common, especially in early recovery, that we struggle to develop support in new friendships, and we have to look at the reasons for that. Many of us are socially anxious, deeply insecure, and as rough as that is, those are things that you bring with you potentially to your new partnership. And so we need to examine that. We need to put our recovery first, put our healing first, and give ourselves enough stability before we go looking to add things like this to our lives. We also would do well to examine our priorities. If you're needing to rebuild connections to your children, to your family, to other loved ones, ideally that's going to be a higher priority than finding a romantic partner. For most of us, our greatest fear, of course, is that we're going to die alone. And so we seek a partnership the way that a person who has just crawled across a desert pursues water. We do so too quickly. There's an old joke about what do two people in recovery need on the third date, and the answer is a U-Haul. We rush things, and we would do well to slow down and look back on the patterns in our lives. This is a little bit quirky, but when I talk to folks who really have a hard time noticing patterns, I suggest to them that they go through their own social media and see if they can notice any patterns. Relationships that come and go, resolve that comes and goes, and let's examine that. Let's take a look at all of this. My bias and my belief is that the two most important relationships I have are with myself and with my higher power. And that's the foundation that all other relationships are built upon. If I'm not good with those two things, then my ability to relate to others, my ability to do really much of anything is compromised. My suggestion before you go looking for a new partner is to ask yourself, what do I bring to a partnership? What do I have to offer? Secondly, what baggage do I bring with me? And third, and perhaps most importantly, what are my expectations of a potential partner, and what are my expectations of myself in a partnership? In other words, what do I know about how to have a healthy partnership, and what kind of expectations am I bringing with me? We still have this notion that if you find the perfect love, everything in your life gets better, everything in your life transforms, and it's just simply not true. I understand the seductiveness of that belief, but despite what romantic comedies would have us believe, that's just not what's happening. So there's a ton that I can share with you about what I have experienced as congruent or helpful in forming healthy relationships, but I always quote my wife, the accountant. My wife is not a touchy-feely person, but she understands relationships very, very well. And she would simply say to you, relationships are work. So you either do the work or you get to have a less than satisfying partnership. When you love someone, you just do your damnedest to make the relationship grow by truly being partners in all things, and being willing to strive together, being willing to struggle together. Whatever you're going through, you don't go through it alone, you go through it as a couple. There's a recipe for a healthy relationship in recovery that usually annoys people. It is friendship, courtship, relationship. And that is a perfect progression to build a foundation for a new partnership. Get to know each other well. Determine whether or not you actually like each other. Too often, we learn over and over again that lust is not love. We tend to, again, pursue things very quickly, and we don't give ourselves or our partners time. There's always a certain amount of pressure that seems to accompany our ventures. Forget everything that you've learned in romantic comedies, everything that you've seen on the Hallmark Channel. I thought it was hysterical recently. I saw a meme that referred to the kind of movies you see on the Hallmark Channel as constituting quote-unquote relational porn, which I think is brilliant. We have to learn and implement healthy relationship skills, obviously, before we're going to have a relationship, but we too often don't really understand what that is, and I'm always wanting to keep things really simple. So I think if I had to identify one key ingredient to a healthy relationship, it's choosing vulnerability, choosing to be vulnerable with each other. Vulnerability is the key ingredient to intimacy, but it's the thing that most of us fear. We're terribly uncomfortable with it, and we would do well to examine why that is. In different times and places, we were vulnerable, we were hurt, we experienced abuse, we went through traumatic events, and we learned to defend ourselves, we learned to hide ourselves, we learned to deny our own needs, wants, and feelings. And being able to communicate very simply to our partners, here's what I want, here's what I need, here's what I'm feeling, is so essentially common sense approached, but it's also uncomfortable for most of us. So I think we need to take a long look at that, and again, build that comfort level with self, and have a willingness to offer that, not just in our romantic partnerships, but in any intimate relationship, with our children, with our closest friends, with family. Ideally, this is the key to how we relate, and we start unlearning the codependency that we grew up with. We come to a place where we break free of roles that we learned to play in our family of origin. For better and for worse, most of what we know and understand about how to be a partner and how to be a parent, we learned growing up in our family of origin. And so, unfortunately, for an awful lot of us, that means that we learned what not to do. Hello, Dermot. Thank you for joining the stream today. Okay, so I'm going to share with you some rules for how to have a healthy partnership. And again, would love to hear your comments or questions, and even if they're not on topic, very happy to talk about what's going on in your recovery today. So, rule number one, it's not all about you. And that's not really a statement about being selfish. It's a statement about the self-centeredness that is part and parcel to being a quote-unquote good alcoholic. We tend to take on things that don't belong to us. We tend to take blame where it's not ours. We tend to consider that if someone's upset, it must be with us. What ideally is always our choice is that our recovery comes first, and not just our recovery from substance use disorder, but also from trauma, from mental illness, from any form of self-destruction. Without recovery, obviously, we're going to lose anything that's good. The suggestion that my 12-step friends offer is to give yourself at least a year before entering into a new relationship, and I think that's very wise, and I think it's as simple as maintaining a focus on yourself, your own needs, your own development, your own recovery. New relationships are exciting. They tend to distract us from ourselves. I think quite often when folks are told that they should wait a year before the next relationship, they whine and complain because they think that means they can't have sex for the next year. If you are the kind of person that can enjoy casual sex and you are open and honest with others about seeking that, then there's certainly nothing wrong with it. What's more important is making the investment, again, in the relationship you have with self, with your higher power, and with the people that support your recovery. The biggest, whenever I'm asked why is it that so many marriages and partnerships fail, my go-to answer is that two people who don't really like themselves try to love each other. So seeking love from someone else when you're busy being your own worst enemy is akin to taking hostages. It doesn't work, it can't work. In all of your deeds, all of your words, be receptive, be open, be honest. We all talk about having trust issues, and that's understandable given our past experience. But first and foremost, the person you need to trust is yourself. The mistake that too often occurs in partnerships is that we're trying to get on the same page with our partner, despite the fact that we're not on the same page with ourselves. Of course, always maintain an excellent support system. Your partner may be the greatest person ever, but they cannot and will not be everything you need. If my wife was going to be my sole support in life, that would be the equivalent of 3 full-time jobs. I need people in my life who support me and hold me accountable. And too often what I see with couples in recovery is that they have a support system of one. Their partner, their spouse is their greatest form of support. And then what happens when you have conflict with that person? What happens when you need to vent about that person? Suddenly your entire support system is gone. We all have needs, unmet needs, typically from our childhood and our family of origin. But one of the biggest mistakes that we make is seeking to have the needs that a mother or father should have met be met by our partners. And obviously that doesn't work, but it's one of the most common mistakes that we make. It's so common that we refer to people as having mommy issues or daddy issues. And I've always hated those expressions because they're cheapening something that's actually vitally important. The love and acceptance of healthy caregivers are the basis for a child's self-worth. And so when we recognize those needs that were not met, that is a great opportunity for healing. That is a great opportunity to fill the emptiness that we feel. But those things cannot and will not be met by your partner. Too often in our relationships, we have a sense of feeling obligated, and I always emphasize this. We get to consciously choose what commitments we make. We are not obligated. You're not obligated to anything. You do not owe anything to anyone, and you most especially do not owe sex to someone. This too is a common pitfall for people in recovery. Many of us are survivors of sexual abuse and sexual assault, and we approach intimacy as something that is essentially a chore, something that we do for our partners, not something that we necessarily enjoy. And again, these all underscore important aspects of our healing that needs to be ongoing. Next rule, ask her what you want and need, share how you feel. Your partner is not responsible for figuring these things out. You are. It takes great vulnerability to be able to ask her these things, but if we're not asking, we're not receiving. Next piece, a subtle distinction, but one that really matters. We do not take care of each other. We care for each other. To take care of someone is only appropriate if it's a child, if it's someone who's not capable of taking care of themselves. But we have a tendency to take on the responsibility of other people's needs, other people's emotional well-being. And it simply is not valid. When you grow up with people who cannot be trusted to take care of themselves, then too often we learn to take on responsibility for their well-being, for their happiness. And that is codependency in a nutshell. It will never serve us. More ideas, things that I've had great success with. Before you get into some big discussion or something important that you want to address, check in with your partner. Is this a good time for them? Do they have the bandwidth for this? Do we need to plan a time? Or is it something that they're up to doing in the moment? Similarly, if you need to vent, check in with your partner first about can they hold space for you, and make sure that they understand that it's not them that you're angry at before you start spewing hate and discontent. Never use the words if and then in the same sentence. The classic example is, if you loved me, then you would know what I need, know what I feel. You would know any number of things. And it's such bullshit. We are not mind readers, right? Your partner may or may not have the ability to intuitively sense these things, but it is still first, foremost, and always your responsibility to share, your responsibility to ask. Reserve time for yourselves as a couple, and my suggestion is don't let anything short of a true emergency interrupt that. We need to foster this relationship. We need to continuously grow this relationship, and spending time together one-on-one is an important part of that. My simplest suggestion, your partner should always be your best friend. And this is why the approach of friendship, courtship, relationship is so successful. Ideally, we put no one before them. We have lots of other supportive people, lots of other friends and people that are important in our lives, but we make our partner our greatest priority, second, of course, to ourselves, our relationship with a higher power, and our recovery. Deal with your resentments prior to going into your next partnership. Deal with them in therapy. Work them through with a sponsor. Notice inner conflicts that you have between you and you. These are all potential poison to your next partnership, and they're ideally things that we will resolve so that they don't continue to manifest in some of the patterns that you might see in your past relationships. Never distance yourself because of fear. Whatever you're going through, go through it together. When we are afraid, we tend to withdraw, we tend to pull back. And so my suggestion to couples is that whatever you're going through, go through it together. Catch yourself worrying or wondering whether or not you're being a burden or an imposition. You most certainly are not. And think about it this way too. When you decide not to share something with your partner, you're making a decision for them. You've decided that they shouldn't have to experience or shouldn't have to support you in this. And my guess is you don't appreciate it when people make decisions for you. Hello, Jamie. Yes, I agree completely. The quote, you have not because you ask not. Excellent way of putting that. My experience is that the two hardest things for couples to talk about are sexuality and spirituality. There's usually a certain amount of awkwardness and an enormous amount of vulnerability in that. It's amusing to me because when I've done couples work with people who have been together a very long time, I'll always ask about their sex life, and they will almost invariably indicate that it's just okay or not good. And I'll say, okay, can we talk about that? And they'll immediately look super uncomfortable and be like, no, I don't really want to talk about that. So I make them a deal. I'll say, look, we can have half an hour of awkward conversation, and that could result in a lifetime of better sex. What do you say? Are you down for that? Talking about spirituality, it's amazing to me. It's one of the things that I get to do most as a therapist is talk to people about their faith, about their higher power. And so many of us are afraid to embrace this kind of vulnerability because the way those conversations most often start is the person wants to talk to me about their faith or the things that they're choosing, but they'll preface it by saying, you're going to think I'm crazy, but here's what my experience has been. And so I get it. It's an uncomfortable thing to ask for people to hold space for. A lot of us are on some type of journey spiritually. We're seeking, we're looking to grow, looking to have a better relationship with a higher power. But again, those are so basic and foundational to life and to all relationships that I think we have to choose that vulnerability and just share. Maintain individual pursuits outside of your partnership. Hobbies, things that you love doing, things that you look forward to are really important. It's great if you have a long list of things that you enjoy doing together. Having solo pursuits and taking time for yourself is also important. We can't be with each other 24/7, 365. It's not healthy. It's not conducive to maintaining outside friendships. And we simply need some alone time sometimes. Be open and honest with your partner about what isn't working. Don't wait until something happens again to address it. That's a mistake that we most often make when we're fighting, when we have conflict. Take some time to have a conversation when you're both calm, when things are going okay, and just say, look, here's something that I'm noticing in our partnership, and I'd like for it to be better. There's a recipe that sometimes people in 12-step programs talk about. It's called When You, I Feel, and I Wish. So we always encourage people to make I statements. I'm feeling these things. I'm noticing these patterns. I'm feeling that my needs aren't getting met, and being able to talk about those very simply and directly will eliminate most of the miscommunication, misunderstandings that we have. It's obviously very simple to understand, but not necessarily easy to do, because again, it requires that vulnerability. Next piece, express gratitude. Take absolutely nothing for granted. Say thank you as often as you possibly can. One of the difficulties that I see in human nature is that if something stays the same long enough, it becomes normal. And as soon as it becomes our normal, we stop thinking about it, and we make the mistake of taking it for granted. So being able to express appreciation for each other, for the little things, just bringing your partner coffee in the morning and enjoying those small expressions of love is vitally important. Choose things that express your love for each other. It's not hard to make your partner feel special. It just isn't. Demonstrating that you're thinking about them when you're away from them, demonstrating that you have an understanding of what's important to them, what it is that they value, and being willing to provide some things. Being able to respect differences in values, being able to honor and hold space for each other. Jamie, thank you for the question. How do you ask the question about spirituality? I don't think the wording is important. I think if you're uncomfortable with something, my suggestion is to name it. Just to very simply say, whatever it is, I want to be able to talk to you about this. I'm really uncomfortable with this topic, and I'm afraid that I won't communicate it very effectively. So please just be patient with me. To talk about spirituality is a very huge topic, right? Because what it is to any given person may be very different. So for some folks, their spirituality is based around nature. For others, it's based around a Judeo or Christian God. So just being open and honest and owning your discomfort. I always say lead with your fears. Whatever you're afraid will come out of this communication, name that up front. It's kind of like when I do public speaking. If I'm nervous, I'll say to people, please be patient with me. I'm very nervous to be up here. And what I notice is that folks respond really well because they're familiar with that discomfort. They're familiar with that fear. All of us are familiar with agonizing and trying to find the right words to express ourselves. And it's really not about being articulate or eloquent. It's about being open and descriptive and making this a mutual process where if I'm not saying things in a way that makes sense to you, please let's work together so that we can come to a greater understanding of ourselves and each other. We all know to take the perspective of others, to put ourselves in their shoes. But in the context of a partnership, I would say let's take that a couple of steps further. Learn to see things through your partner's eyes. Ask them to teach you to see things as they do. This is hard to do because it requires putting aside your own beliefs and values, your own prejudices and biases long enough to really meaningfully try to see things as your partner does. But being able to see through their eyes will, of course, provide you a greater understanding, will reduce conflict, will create greater opportunities. And then what can really be amazing is making the choice to see yourself as your partner sees you. Too often we deflect praise, recognition, and compliments. We are uncomfortable receiving these things, and so we struggle to honor our partner's truth. We deflect praise and we joke about it and we say, oh, you're just being nice, and we act as though they don't really mean it. Honoring our client's truth is something that we're likely to do about everything except ourselves. Too often our partner's opinion of us or the way that they see us is far more flattering than how it is that we see ourselves. And so it's okay, we don't necessarily have to agree, but we have to be willing to accept that that is their truth. And the more open we become to our partner's truth, there's a greater chance that how we see ourselves, how we relate to ourselves will improve. And this is one way in which it's not only important to be open-minded, it's vital to be open to feedback and suggestions. For too many of us, the ways in which we relate to ourselves are based on our childhoods, based on past abusive relationships, and we've internalized so many negative beliefs about ourselves, and too often we treat ourselves the way that the people who hurt us the most did. So, I hope that you'll take some opportunities here and reflect on what are the patterns that you notice in your past relationships. What is your current partnership like? How can it be better? Can you have a conversation with your partner about that? And can you look for your part in things? Let's address your side of the street and make sure that you are not complacent, not stagnant, but continuing to grow. We have this mythology that people sometimes grow apart, and I strongly disagree. We don't grow apart, we fail to grow together. And so the opportunities to grow together in a partnership are endless, but we have to be open, honest, and willing. We have to be expressive. We have to embrace vulnerability. And these are the keys to having the partnership that we most want. So, as always, I hope you're taking excellent care of yourself. I hope that you're reaching out to others, and I hope that you'll connect with me. If I can answer questions or provide resources for your recovery, please connect with me. Jim@sobernow.com is the easiest way to do that. Please check out SoberNow's YouTube channel. 100 or more free videos there on different aspects of recovery. And please, of course, check out our site, sobernow.com, for completely anonymity and complete confidentiality with a home study program that allows you to go at your own pace. We have 2 of them. One to strengthen your recovery from substance use disorder, and a second one for people like myself who identify as affected others. Of course, it's heartbreaking and stressful to have someone who we love in active addiction, and so all the more reason for us to be supporting each other. So, would love to hear from you. Topics that you'd like to see covered in future live streams. All suggestions are welcomed and honored. I look forward to talking to you again soon.